Chapter 2 Philosophy The Love for Knowledge by Wim Hof. When I was 13, I spent my autumn holiday reading a book about psychology. It was a book with mysterious concepts that I hoped I would soon understand. I knew the text held value, so I committed my time and separated myself from the world to gain a better understanding. The psychological terminology gave birth to my inquisitive mind and the urge to philosophize everything around me. It was then that I began to see the world in a different light. All at once, I wanted to learn about different cultures, traditions, and new languages. I applied for a passport as soon as I was of age, excited when I finally received it. I packed my bright orange backpack and with my thumbs up, I hitchhiked to Morocco. When I was traveling through Belgium, I thought it would be helpful to learn a few catchphrases that would help me survive. I was taught French in school, but it wasn't enough to get by. Luckily, the people I met while traveling were willing to teach me a few important phrases like, "Are you going to Paris? Thank you. Where's the bathroom? Where am I?" Using this method, I progressively learned French. Later on in my life, I came to learn many other languages this way through similar methods, such as Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Japanese, Sanskrit, which was actually from a teacher, and Polish. I had also learned German from living 1 kilometer away from the border of Germany. Dutch, however, is my native language. I've come to understand that if you want to learn something badly enough, you'll find a way to make it happen. Having the will to search and succeed is very important. Even though I had learned many languages, I still felt like there was something missing. As I approached my adolescence, I became more inquisitive. I knew about the great philosophers, the seers, traditions, cultures, and esoteric disciplines, yet something was missing. I believe an inquisitive mind always finds what it's looking for. It is that irrational curiosity that ultimately stumbles upon the answer. I found my answer in December when I was 17. I was home thinking about this hole in myself when I suddenly noticed the snow outside. As the snowflakes began to cover the multicolored environment in a beautiful white blanket, a warm feeling washed over me. I watched until the snow grew thick on the ground, and I embraced the white desert as the snow began to fall harder. I needed to go out into it. So after I put on my shoes and a thick pullover jacket, I was off. That crispy sound, when walking over a new layer of snow, filled my ears as the strange but beautiful white blanket changed the appearance of the land. There was intimacy and a sort of mysticism that filled the cool air. Nearby, a couple of kids were rolling around in the snow, wrestling with each other. This moment called me to reminisce about my past. Now, here, Wim is actually reflecting back to a few years prior to him writing this message. And he says, "When the first snow fell 3 years prior to this moment, I had a similar urgency to go out into it. I took off my shoes and began walking around the nearby park with my wife and son. After about an hour of walking around, Noah, my son, bent over to make a snowball. Noah finished his creation, and we continued walking while he held it at his side. My wife and I laughed and talked as we admired the newly covered Amsterdam. An hour later, we returned home. I went to take off my son's jacket when I realized that he was still holding on to the ball of snow in his hands. He told me he wanted to put it in the fridge and store it. Like most children, they wanted things to last forever. So we let him cherish the memory by storing the snowball in the freezer. I grew curious as to how he was able to hold on to that chilled ball for so long and not complain about the pain. I asked Noah to show me his hands so that I could see if there was any damage. And to my surprise, his hands weren't even cold at all. In fact, they were incredibly warm. I'll never forget my son's first experience with the cold. Anyway, there I was in the snow-covered pasture, when I felt an irrational urge to take off my socks and shoes. Barefooted, I became strangely aware that it was not cold, just soft. There was an absence of pain. Instead, I felt a great feeling of joy and power. My conceptual being was flabbergasted. I wandered around in the snow for hours, taking in the vast whiteness. It inspired me. Whenever something touches me in a way that makes me reflect, I don't feel like quitting. I don't feel limits, just a greater sense of being. That is the essence of meditation, where thoughts are no longer consciously driven. That moment made a monumental impact in my life. The experience changed the way that I thought about the cold. At the time, I couldn't understand how, but it changed the way I perceived it. It was my new friend. To me, Expanding consciousness is the path to true knowledge. The material you learn from books ultimately leads to an expanding consciousness, and that experience finally quenched my thirst for knowledge. I now felt peace within, and my mind was still. Everyone will experience these moments at some point in his or her life. I'm convinced that it's these moments that are meant to show us that there is more to life than satisfying our desires. Sometime after this experience, I traveled 200 kilometers up north to Amsterdam, the cosmopolitan city. I wanted to meet fresh, new minds. I had hoped to meet poets, writers, painters, Holland's best yoga teachers, karate experts, and more. The thirst for knowledge continued to grow inside of me, and Amsterdam, I realized, couldn't fix it. I was clueless as to how to quench that thirst, and I quickly became lethargic. That's when I began to think about challenges. I wanted to conquer something that would make me feel more productive. And that's when the idea came to me. I would travel from Amsterdam to Dakar, Senegal on bicycle with my brother Andre. The idea had potential to break the pattern, yet it was powerful enough to get me back on my feet. I had found some hope.